Hey everyone, Nick here. This video will be a complete overview of the guest user group. We'll cover the basic guest settings, allowing guest users to submit work requests, and guest operations in a multi-site environment. While guest functionality is limited, they do have large implications when setting up your CMMS. Guests in Maintenance Assistant are not specific users or accounts, and they do not require email addresses or additional seats. Guest users can be anyone from a technician who doesn't need access to the CMMS, a customer who has noticed a problem, or a crew member who wants to quickly make a request. Guests in Maintenance Assistant have one and only one functional role: submitting work requests from the login screen. A work request is a work order that is created with the status requested and must be sent to a maintenance manager for approval before being switched to active. The final product looks something like this, with a guest user selecting the Submit Work Request button, entering the issue in the form, and submitting. Myself, as a manager, then logs in, views the work request, accesses the work order, assesses the work order, and then assigns it for completion. Looks right for you? Here's how to set it up. The first step is to allow the guest user group access to the Submit Work Request button. Like other user groups, guest users have specific page and menu permissions, which dictate how much of the application they can see. However, Maintenance Assistant only supports guest users and the Submit Work Request option, so these are the only fields we are concerned with. I'll select CMMS Settings, User Groups, Guests. Step 1 are the menu permissions. I'll select the Can See Submit Work Request menu item to ensure the button appears on the login screen. Next, I make sure the user can view and save the page by giving him certain page permissions. Click Page Permissions and filter to the Submit Work Request item in the dropdown, and select all the boxes. Hit Save, and now our guest user can see and save a work request. The second step is to configure exactly what information our requests require. I'll navigate to CMMS Settings and then Work Requests. By default, all guest work requests contain only description, maintenance type, priority, and estimated hour fields. However, if additional fields are required, we can do so in CMMS Settings. Here we have two options. Showing Contact Inputs adds 3 additional fields: requester name, phone number, and email. Since guest users do not have accounts in the CMMS, this information can be useful when following up and contacting the requester. Making this information a required field will not allow a guest user to submit the form unless the fields have been filled out. Send email when work request is completed means that an email notification will be sent to the guest user upon work order completion. It'll be sent to whatever email is specified in the email field. When contact information is inputted in a request, it is found under the Completion tab. Lower down in the Settings tab, we have the option of Asset Input. Asset Input adds the field for asset selection on the request and can be useful for creating more detailed work requests. This way, managers know exactly what asset requires the work order. Be careful with this option. Allowing asset selection on guest work requests allows full visibility of your asset tree to any user. As with the previous setting, making asset input a required field will not allow them to submit the form without entering an asset. The final step is to set the default work order status. In most cases, work orders submitted by guest users are set to requested. Since anyone can log tickets, it's useful for a manager to review all work orders before assigning them to technicians. On the other hand, it may be more efficient to set work orders as being assigned immediately. It's really up to you to decide how work requests function in your system. If you're ever interested in double-checking who has submitted a particular request, the initial creator of the work order can be found in the Work Log tab. In this example, the initial user was a guest user, so I know this was created by someone not registered in the system. If multi-site is enabled on your system, there are a few more implications for guest users as well. For a guest user to have the ability to select an asset from a specific site, the guest user group must first be added to that site with guest permissions. I'll navigate to CMMS Settings, Users, Guests, and then click Sites and User Groups. By default, a guest user is moved to No Site. Here, I'll click the Add button and select the site that I want my guest user to have access to. Once the site is selected, I check off the guest user group and hit OK. This allows for customization of guest user permissions. Guest users can be assigned to certain sites and not others, with only certain assets being viewable. Experiment with this feature on your own system. And that's about it. Feel free to rewatch this video or contact Maintenance Assistant if you have any further questions about the guest user.